Hello Internet and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We are a channel all about tabletop gaming. My name is Wyatt and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Pathfinder 2nd Edition's Bestiary 3. So we haven't really covered the other two bestiaries much other than telling you to purchase them, and you should if you haven't already, but they are chock full of really interesting monsters. I've sort of hinted at it in some other videos, but the Pathfinder 2nd Edition monster design is excellent. In addition to having encounter building rules that actually work, check out our video on that, it's also just really, really fun. There are no monsters in here in any of these books. I won't say no, but I'll say very few monsters in these books that are just a stat block with some bonuses and like a slam attack sort of thing. They all have unique actions and dynamic round-to-round options. If not a lot of round-to-round options, at least something to surprise your players. Not necessarily gotcha surprises. Those are never good in tabletop RPGs, or at least not things you want to do very often. But these creatures all will bring something to the table so that even if it might look like to the players like, okay, here comes another large, slow, brute monster, it may turn out that one's got some tricks they didn't see coming. So for that reason, pick up any Pathfinder 2e bestiaries you can. If you're playing Pathfinder 2e, you should have these. You should be checking them all out. You should be at least looking through the critters that you can find on Archives of Nethys, things like that. I don't have the physical copy of Bestiary 3 in my hands right now, waiting for that to ship, but Pathfinder and Paizo have a great subscription service where once my order shipped, which it just did, I get access to the PDF immediately. So I've had it for a day or two now, and I've gotten to look through it. It's so much fun. So, what's left that wasn't covered in Bestiary 1 and 2? Well, Bestiary 1 really hit most of the standards, the things that you would want to see. Your orcs, your trolls, your chromatic and metallic dragons, all that sort of things, the standards. And then Bestiary 2 came in and hit a lot of fairly, I won't say unique to Pathfinder, but a lot of classics that were where you see Pathfinder really start to deviate from some of the source games that it evolved out of. Bestiary 3 is coming in and giving us not necessarily niche creatures, but certainly some smaller chunks of themes as far as the creatures go. There's a wide swath of creatures for certain, but there's a real focus on a few things. We see a focus on some more undead, which is good. I mean, realistically speaking, probably 1 in 4 campaigns are going to have undead as the primary bad guy. If you consider, you've got dragons, you've got undead, you've got aberrations, and then you've got fae, maybe, as far as your big bads traditional go. Assuming it's not just some evil king and he's not secretly a lich or a vampire or something. So it's good to have a lot of undead. We're also getting a large number of clockwork creatures and mechanical creatures, and we're getting quite a nice little selection of this new type of creature called troops. And we'll get to a little more info about troops in a moment. So Bestiary 3 has entries for most of the new ancestries that we saw in Lost Omens Ancestry Guide. Could be all of them, but I'm going to say most. I didn't cross-reference and double-check. So, some of the creatures that, we were missing from other bestiaries but are now playable, they've given us at least a de facto sort of monster version of them so you can throw them at your players easily. Most of these typically are between levels 1 and 3 or 4, depending on the creature. And what's interesting about that is we can sort of gauge and see what other creatures may be possibly coming as ancestries down the line. So we have a few candidates. Generally, you want to see humanoid creatures, small or medium, that are low level. That way the developers don't have to figure out a way to give them a powerful ability to feel like themselves. And then you typically are going to want to look for something that is non-evil. So I have a little list here of things that could be. I'm by no means saying any of these are going to be, well, we know one will be, but I'm not saying that any of these are necessarily going to become ancestries in the future, just that they are things to keep your eye on. There are Azer, which are these sort of dwarf-like people from the elemental plane of fire. There are Gathlane, which are these little, almost like something between an elf and a leshy, or a pixie and a leshy, and they're very small and they have wings made of branches and leaves. The Goran are plant-based humans that are medium-sized, and they look a lot more humanoid versus, say, leshies, which are a little small and just look like house plants with arms and legs. There are the Munavri, which are, I have no idea if I'm saying that right. Someone will let me know in the comments, I'm sure. But they are sort of like anti-drow, I guess. They are humanoids ancestry that went underground and sort of became these telekinetic bastions of good. You know, these little bright spots amidst all the evil that is down in the deep dark, as it were. We also have Samsaran, which are these sort of reincarnated over and over sort of mystical people. We have Umasi, which could wind up being a sort of subset of Flesh Warp, or even their own ancestry maybe. But they're these people who have to graft other living flesh onto their body because their bodies are just constantly decaying for some unknown reason. So that's fun. We have two types of snake folk who could be possible contenders. We have the Nagaji and we have the Vishkanya. They have slightly different looks. One of them looks more like a traditional like UNT. That's the Vishkanya, where they look mostly like humans with just scales and things like that. And then you have the much more monstrous but still bipedal humanoid, the Nagaji, who look much closer to Pathfinder 2e's lizard folk than to a humanoid, a traditional humanoid. Then we have a couple of my favorites. We have the Weirwood. Those are, in addition to meeting the criteria I sort of talked about, they also were for sure an ancestry in Pathfinder 1st edition. So even if we don't see them anytime soon, I would really be surprised if we don't see them. They could end up being a sub or a heritage within automatons that are coming in Guns and Gears. Who's to say? Or they could be treated as their own unique thing. And they are just sort of wooden constructs. And then the Vanara, which are monkey people, and I am very much here for these Journey to the West, Monkey King sort of characters. It's a really cool aesthetic. The art in the book is fantastic. And on that subject, we're not showing the art from the book. It's just a thing that we try not to do. We don't want to show you the product because so much of it is going to be free and available on archives of Nethys. So we don't want to. There's not really a need for us to show it to you. You can go and look it up there yourselves eventually, but also, we just want to, Pathfinder, Paizo are careful with when and where they show the art, so we're going to be just as careful with when and where we show that art. So anything that you see will just be what we found that they have posted as promotional images themselves. Finally, we have the Steno. No idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they are these Medusa people. They have snakes for hair, just when you picture a Medusa. And what's really cool about that is those have been heavily hinted at being a possible ancestry by the developers. We also have a few new templates throughout. I think if you're not familiar, templates are these sort of bolt-on things that you can add on top of a monster to turn it into a different type of monster. We've seen them for most of your types of undead, and there's a couple more in this. But we've got this really interesting one, I think, to make these divine wardens, they're called. And it's functionally you can apply it to any construct, and it turns them into this sort of it gives them almost like cleric and champion powers, this pseudo-holy champion for that, or unholy, I suppose, for that deity. And that's pretty neat. It's a great thing as a GM to just have this little template to apply, like, oh, you're going to try to break into this tomb. Well, I have a feeling that Pharasma is going to have some issues with that and is probably going to do something about that. But it really varies completely. There's one presented, and we got a free one, which we'll put a link down below. But we're going to go ahead and push that art up. that was added as a blog post as an additional example, so you can see that, and it's pretty fun, and it's going to be a really useful thing for a lot of GMs, I think. But each bestiary has added a new, or a couple of new, categories of dragons. You know, we had the metallic and the chromatic before. Then we got some sort of earth type of dragons, these sort of elemental dragons. And now we're getting these regional dragons that are the imperial dragons. And those are the sort of the Far East traditional, Chinese, Japanese sort of depictions, which, have their own variations, but each of these, and there's almost like a sort of a Pokemon rock, paper, scissors, sort of how they interact. But there's forest, sea, sky, underworld, and sovereign. We're also getting flumps, overdue, I think. Very glad to see those. And we're getting some new types of creatures called kami, which are very much from sort of traditional Japanese folklore. And you see that a lot in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I really like it, especially because they tend to do a fairly good job, especially in the new edition, of being pretty respectful about the cultures that they're pulling from. But we get a lot of great real-world mythological creatures and cryptids. There's two great reasons for that. One, they are public domain. Nobody owns the right to Sasquatches and Mothmans. Mothmen? No one owns the right to those, so they're free, but they're also iconic. A lot of people, especially, people who have a lot of overlap in the types of nerddoms they dip their toes into, are going to have heard of these, and so you get some recognition that you would really be hard to manufacture on your own, that you just get to grab and take. So it's a brilliant move, and I, as a big cryptozoology nerd, I want to believe Nessie's there. I know she's probably not, but I want to believe. And so just having these rules for all these creatures that, from the time I was a little kid, I was looking up and reading about is just a lot of fun. Going back to the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide, we're also getting a whole lot of new hags that were the basis for the new maze, the new changeling lineages that we saw there. So if you were wondering, what's a blood hag? I can be a changeling descended from a blood hag, but what's a blood hag? Now you have blood hags. And, if you're somebody who really wishes that the Pathfinder changelings were more like the Eberron changelings, me, this person does, then good news, that's what the blood changeling does. We're also getting two brand new types of undead dragon. We got Raveners previously, now we're getting Worm Wraiths, which are ghost dragons. Just gets worse and worse. And also the possibly less dangerous, but still imposing enough, zombie dragons. But yeah, zombie dragons, incorporeal dragons that have to feed on your players. They're going to hate it, you're going to love it, you should check it out. Finally, we're going to talk about troops. Troops are a really cool new idea. A lot of games have had similar things, and most games have had swarms and things like that. But I really like the way Pathfinder is handling their troops. We get presented with several. Too many for me to try to memorize or pretend that I'm reading them to you off the cuff, so I'm definitely going to read them from a list. So we have a Hell Knight Cavalry Brigade. We have a City Guard Squadron. We have Night Marchers, which are based on the Hawaiian mythological, I guess, sort of creature, or maybe just event. Rancorous Priesthood, which, are a bunch of divine casters, but there's also a little sidebar telling you what tweaks to adjust if you wanted to turn it into a bunch of divine cast, or not a bunch of divine, but a bunch of primal casters, arcane, whatever you need. There's a troop of shamblers, which are these sort of like zombies. There's a skeleton troop, and we have a terracotta soldier garrison. Now, for all these that we didn't already have rules for singularly, they provide the singular rules for, so those terracotta soldiers, super freaking cool. And then on the cover, you can actually see a skeleton troop getting attacked by a swarm of tooth fairies, which are excellent. So troops begin as gargantuan enemies. They take up a 4x4 square of 5-foot squares, and they also have different thresholds of HP. As you deplete that HP and you reach the different thresholds, they cannot recover past that if there is some means to do so for them. And they also shrink in size as well. So So they will become a smaller unit on the battlefield as either members are falling or retreating, surrendering, whatever is appropriate for the troop. Troops have unique actions. They have a few unique traits that come with their own set of rules, which, again, you'll have to buy the book, check that out to see exactly what they have going for them. But, as you get past those thresholds, they get smaller and smaller. They are potentially going to have some actions that they cannot continue to use. I don't think I saw anywhere they actually get more actions, but I could have missed one. But, so they will change dynamically a little bit as they get smaller and smaller. And then eventually, once they get to their bottom threshold, you can roleplay that as either they've all fled or surrendered, whatever is appropriate for that group and that situation. This is a pretty simple and elegant way to handle what could have been a pretty complicated situation. And as anyone who's run a lot of troops in combat, I really could have used these a couple of weeks ago. You know that the simpler is the better for troops, because it can already just be a daunting thing to deal with. So by treating them as much like a monster as possible, they have done a lot of the work for you as a GM to just be able to say, okay, well, I can run this. This is going to be pretty straightforward, while still feeling like a very different type of encounter. So that's a lot of different types of troops, but the good news is, if you didn't like any of those, none of those are going to work for what you need. You're so picky, but the good news is that it seems like it's pretty straightforward to create a troop, and some of the developers have hinted and said that they might work on trying to get some official guidelines out on it. But again, for now, it looks pretty straightforward. It looks like the sort of thing that you could do. Just add the troop trait, set your thresholds, and you'll probably be okay. So that's about it for the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiary 3. It's really cool. I can't wait to get my physical copy. I've already, scrolled through it on my device, but it's not the same as just going through it, sitting down, especially if I can get a rainy afternoon. Just think of ways to kill my players. It's a lot of fun. So, I personally, I love having those, but it's coming. It may be already have a street date be out by the time you guys are seeing this, but I think it's not technically until April 7th. So it got pushed back a little bit. So, if you have the subscription, you could be getting access to it anytime like I did. Either way, check it out when you can. More monsters is always better when you're a GM. We do a lot of these videos on the ancestries and the classes and all this stuff, and I get really excited about it for my players. But, I play maybe one character every 2 years at best. That's a really generous guess. But so for me, when I get these bestiaries, that's the real exciting stuff for me. Just having new toys to play with and throw at my players. So that's it. I hope you had fun. If you did, don't forget to click like, subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps us out. And, come on by our Discord server. There's a link down in the description. It's a lot of fun, a lot of nice folks, just being nerdy, hanging out. So come on by. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Welcome to the Collective.